Hello, Moobarkfluff, and welcome to Barely Furcasting featuring Taebyn. I am Barely Normal, and with me is Rayne Raccoon sitting in for Taebyn while he's at Denver. Taebyn. Yeah, the Taebyn angel.
Taebyn.
Yeah, he's at Denver. Well, Rayne, today is one of those special spotlight episodes, and with us in studio are the founders of the slightly furry beverage company, Martini and Spork. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. Yeah. So before we get to the brewing business, let's talk about furries. So what are each of your fursonas?
Okay. Well, I am a fox it's basically a red fox with gray hair, and I have a distinctive red mohawk that adorns the company logo.
Aha. Okay.
And I am a rabbit, black and white rabbit, basically. Yeah. Among many other critters that I have in my kingdom.
All right. So, Martini, for you first, then, how did you discover the fandom?
Oh, geez. Let me give you the short version of it. Had known about them online and actually didn't like them initially because I used to moderate online forums and boards. And one of those was one that had like image posts and stuff like that. And people would constantly put copyrighted material. And so I'd be that mod that would have to kick them off the board. And so initially I had like a not so great initial experience with them. But then I went to my first ever Midwest Fur Fest back in 2012.
Oh, wow.
And had such a good time that I made my first fursona pretty much that weekend. So I think because back then it was just before Thanksgiving. So it was over Thanksgiving dinner. I was getting like sketches sent in of my new character, and it kind of evolved from there.
Okay. And how did you come up with your name?
It's from an old internet handle that I've had for quite some time. That's a short version of Martini Software, which is what I did all my programming stuff under. So I called it Martini Software short to make it like a little easier to pronounce. And I kind of panicked when I was registering at Midwest Fur Fest. I was like typing into the computer, it's like, well, what's your fursona name? And I was like, and I just panicked and typed in Martini Soft. And a lot of people just started calling me Martin Soft.
Martin Soft. Okay.
Or was it at home?
That was at con because I didn't buy a badge for that weekend, so I was doing like the night registration. So I had to go into like the reg room and like go on the laptop and like fill out a reg form. And when it asked for my fursona handle, I was like, oh crap, what do I put in here? And that's where I just decided to stick with it to make it simple.
Nice. And Spork, how about you?
Oh, Jesus, this was like back in '97, I think. And it was basically looking up fursuits because I was like, man, I want a like cool animal person costume. And then I stumbled across the word zoot because apparently that used to be the term in the early '90s, which I haven't heard honestly since.
Really? I hadn't heard that either.
Yeah. And it just kind of like divulged from there. It was just like, oh, cool. Or there's this furries thing. What is this? They like animal costumes. Cool. What else is there? And like art and this and culture and that. So it was just like the floodgates just opened from there.
So you guys have been in the fandom for a number of years then, since the 90s. And then how did you guys find each other?
Basically at Midwest. Yeah, pretty much at Midwest Fur Fest, because it was the year after that I ended up going to a room party, which is where I met not just Spork, but a bunch of the other folks that pretty much ran the con.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of like an accidental happenstance. And then pretty much since that following year, so from 2014 onward, I was staff for Midwest Fur Fest up until last year.
Nice.
Was basically last year. So this year I'm not actually going. So it's really weird to see all the chatter about it, but I'm like, nope, not doing staffing this year. That's kind of how I met a lot of those folks, but Spork from that point on. So it's like, 2013, basically all the way onward.
Cool. So do you guys hold brewing panels at the cons when you go?
I've helped with one at Fur Squared, which is a small fur con that happens in Milwaukee. So I've helped like co-host a panel years ago, back when I was doing more home brewing stuff, and I knew other furries who had been getting into it, so I helped co-host a panel with them. But otherwise, the one we're actually going to do sort of officially as a company is going to be at Furvana in a few weeks, actually, down in Ocean Shores. It's one of the local regional cons here.
Before we get into the beer and cider business discussion, what's your favorite plushie? Or do you have a favorite plushie? Do you have a plushie?
I do, and they're a random assortment of different fox plushies that I've gotten while traveling, or ones that like my partner's gotten me just because it's cute fox things. I'm a sucker for that. So, but that's kind of it. Yeah, because I have like one on my windowsill, like in the kitchen, so I see it every morning, and then I have like two at my desk that are buried under a bunch of paperwork right now, but they're there.
I think it'll be my new one. Aaron, Birchwood partner. They just got me a little wolf plushie to put in my car because apparently out here we've noticed a lot of our friends have like a little mini one, like a beanbag one of their spouse that they drive with on their dashboard. So we're like, okay, well everyone else is doing this, so let's do this. So we were out. I'm pointing to Martini because he's across the table from me as we talk. But we were out on our Portland trip for cidery stuff last week, and I came across a little donkey one because that's like kind of what I'm leaning into more now. As a persona, and I got that for my partner, and then they went and just ordered. Well, like, what's this company? Cool, they make a wolf one. Good, done. Now you have one too. So that's my new favorite because it'll just sit in my car. I just put it in my car literally this morning. So
nice. All right, so I know you guys come from different backgrounds, and how is it that you started brewing individually, and then how did you bring that together?
All right, so I started about 10 years ago now, give or take. I got a kit, basically like a starting a homebrew kit from my older brother who was out in New York. So I went to his wedding years before that, and he made a mead for his wedding that I got pretty lit on, and kept asking him and nagging him since then of like, how did you do that? And I want to do that myself and all that stuff. And then after the wedding, he sent me a late wedding present of like, here's your brewery starter kit. So it's like a really small glass carboy and all the stuff with like an initial kit just to make our first recipe. And it took us a bit to get around to doing it, but we finally did and made a couple of beers. They were okay. They weren't great. But then I remember having a bottle of Angry Orchard in my parents' bar and thinking like, how hard could this be to make? I could probably make something better. And then I looked up some recipes online and followed them, made a batch that we accidentally contaminated. And then made a second batch, which then I brought to MFF at one of those room parties. Got all my friends very lit because they didn't pay attention when I said that that was like a 9% alcohol cider. They went crazy for it. And ever since then, I just kept perfecting the recipe. And it wasn't until basically 3 years ago now at this point when I started the foundation for the business itself and got it over my head as far as the amount of work to do and all that stuff. And that's where I turned to Spork and I said, hey, you want to do this cidery thing with me? And I don't think he'd actually made anything before then.
So we talked about it, and I showed interest. I was like, I'd like to come over on like a brew day or a cider making day or a meat making day one day. And then it just turned out, do you want to do it now and then turn it into a business? And it was like, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Simple answer, yes.
Yeah, so I threw him right into the deep end of making cider batches. And within, I'd say, 6 or 8 months, give or take, you were basically ready to make your own recipe. And pretty much the last thing we made at my house before we moved everything over and all that stuff was a cherry cider that is now the basis of Witch's Tree, which is one of our products. So
the two starting.
Yeah.
Ginger and then my cherry.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah, hands down the best cider we made at my home setup by far.
All right.
So. You kept speaking everything.
Yeah.
So Martini, you live in the Pacific Northwest, right? You live up in the Seattle area?
I do, yes.
Okay, and that's where you started everything?
No, we started it in Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah, we're both from Chicago. We're both Chicago born and raised natives. So I'm from mostly North Side. His family's from the South Side of Chicago. Yeah, so I always thought it would be a Chicago project, but long story short, it was very difficult and complicated legally to get going in Chicago for us.
Really?
So after about a year and a half of trying, we moved it out to Pacific Northwest, basically around this time last year. And then we were producing in a facility and in the market by November of last year. So
wow,
it moved very fast once we moved it out to the Pacific Northwest.
So why'd you choose the Pacific Northwest?
There's a lot of reasons, but the big reason is the laws here are a lot easier for smaller producers to get started. We get some legal advantages here that we don't get in that state. So like we can distribute ourselves instead of going through a distributor, because distributors will take a percentage cut of what you make in exchange for distributing your stuff. Like they do pay you up front, which is cool, but
Right.
they take like roughly 30 to 40% of your margin. So you have to price accordingly and produce to the point where you can make money in volume. So you have to make a lot of it in order to make it make sense.
I'd say sum it up, you're arguably making less than half if you sold it yourself or put it in a tap room.
Wow. Wow.
So
Good grief.
It's quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good business to be in if you're a distributor, because you're making all the money in the margins.
Yeah.
I was going to get into distributing, not manufacturing. So much easier.
That's the bigger one, is we get to distribute ourselves any amount. And even with a distributor there, if we carve up the deal with them, that way we can do it, basically ourselves. The other advantage is the state of Washington produces over 65% of the United States apple supply. So getting the juice that we can use to produce our cider would be significantly cheaper than back then. It would have been getting it from Michigan or Minnesota. That would be our two major suppliers. Wisconsin a little bit too, but it would be fighting for a more limited supply of apples out there to get what we need for producing enough cider.
Growing seasons and stuff too, harsher winters. And the fact that if we needed to do something ourselves, we could drive 3-ish hours to Yakima Valley here. We're there, it would have been probably 6, maybe 8 if we needed to do a pickup, and that's one way. So like I could do a one-way pickup if they can't get a truck here, no problem. And also the community, both Furry and cider community was better out here. There's only about 5 cideries in Chicago. And when you're that small, you're kind of fighting for your area instead of wanting to like team up, right? Where the breweries out there are like, oh yeah, like get near me, because then we become the strip and everyone comes to us. Right. Out here with the cideries, we were getting that. So everyone was like, oh yeah, come hang with us. And it was also, we were like done with the Midwest, done with the flat, done with the cold. And we were both looking at, if we weren't doing the cidery thing, where would we go?
Right.
And it was as I like to bring up, it was the Furry meme of the Jenga mat spinner, but with only 2 colors. And it's like, where am I going to live? And you spin and it says Seattle and Denver. Right. And literally we were both typical furries in that. In like the last few years, I'm like, I want to get out of the Midwest. I want to go to Seattle. If that doesn't work, I want to go to Denver. And we were like, well, Denver doesn't really work for cidery. It's a total brewery place. If you're doing beer, but not so much cider. And Seattle was like, we know a ton of people out here, furries. We know cool businesses out here we've met. Apples and trees and mountains and fresh air and windy roads and everything, and not flat,
right.
So, and also not harsh winters and less harsh summers. It's like, oh, it's everything looks shiny. So let's go.
Right. And except this last week when it was 100 degrees all week, right? So
I mean, coming from Midwest Chicago, that would be like, cool, that's all of August.
Right.
That's horrible. I'm like, I got my AC unit, it's fine.
Yep.
So did your respective partners look at you crazily when you said we're going to move to Seattle?
Mine definitely did. And initially he's like, all right, I'll stay in Chicago. And then after about 3 months, when I talked to him, he's like, I don't want to do this anymore. So then I went back, because I moved out to Seattle last year in February. And then by basically May, we were planning to move cross country, and like we did it end of June. So it was pretty quick after.
Oh, wow.
After that. Because initially we were going to stay separate and all that stuff, and I was going to visit. And then he got really sick of it. So he said, let's just move. Let's get out of here.
Yep. And what about you, Spork?
Yeah, we were less so because we were already planning on that. Like, I was looking to switch careers anyway, and so was my partner. We were looking to go more tech. We had tech friends out in Seattle. Just come out here. We'll get you into, even if starting things from what you'd be doing out here would be paying around what you guys were making for. I was doing film, and my partner was doing corporate sales stuff, and mine was industrial film. So it was kind of boring. This is boring. I'm like, if we're just doing boring jobs, we might as well do something that pays better and, like cooler area, and just to be different. Like I've lived in Chicagoland area my whole life. My partner comes from Toronto, but moving to Chicago, it's like, I always call Toronto sideways Chicago because the lake's on the south. But it feels like going to Chicago. It's about the same size. The vibe is just like a Canadian Chicago. So they're like, yeah, I just felt like I moved from one Toronto to another. So like, let's go. So we threw it around. So when the cidery thing came up of like, hey, we're going out here, well, my partner was like, yeah, I figured something like this was going to happen.
Yep.
So let's wrap up our loose ends and get the heck out and go do it.
Nice. So then you started your brewery up in the Seattle area, and then or cidery. So do you guys make beer too, or is it just cider?
No, initially we were going to make beer and cider. So we initially called ourselves back then it was Slightly Fuzzy Brewing Company. Because we thought we could do both, but then state of Illinois enforces what are known as the tied house rules, where you can't have more than one type of alcohol production under one roof.
Okay.
They were very big sticklers about it. Washington State doesn't care as much.
Right.
They have way more relaxed rules for that. So if we want to eventually get into beer, we can, but cider and mead were the thing we wanted to do, and that's under what we call a wine license. Believe it or not, it's classified as that in the United States. So, but we started it in Chicago as that, but we couldn't get licensed for it. And so when we moved it out here, we got licensed initially as distributors. So basically we produce our cider in a licensed facility, and then we as distributors buy it out from them at the tax rate basically. And then we can resell it at that point as distributors. But now we're in the process of switching that license over to a production license, which is making its own legal complications now because, again, those tied house rules I just mentioned also don't allow you to be both a producer and a distributor at the same time. You actually have to give one up for the other. You can't run both. So we're maneuvering that tomorrow, I think, with our attorneys.
Wow.
Because it's a complicated answer. It's just effectively it has to do around taxes. Uncle
joy!
Sam doesn't get his cut the right way.
Out of the prohibition, the 3-tier. So it's like what was it? Market, distribution, production, or sales. Like whatchamacallit, like a liquor store.
Retail, basically.
Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. Retail.
Yes. Retail.
And you can't have all three, but like one version could always do a little bit of the others depending on the rules. So hence why producing, we could self-distro until we hit a certain mark we're making, and then we have to go to a distributor company, which, to go back to Chicago, that mark was a lot lower. And that was the other problem with Chicago. It was like, unless you're doing it out of your garage, making minimal amounts, you have to go with a big distributor. Where in Washington State, it's like, no, you're just like beer, where you go up to this very high mark of how many gallons you make before you have to get somebody else with a truck to take care of your stuff. And that's all like keeping it from being a monopoly and keeping everyone fair and not owning each part and stuff.
Nice.
Because those rules apply when we're in retail establishments too. Like we're regulated on how much we're allowed to advertise in each of those bars and restaurants and stuff like that we're in. So they regulate, like if those neon signs you see in bars, those are like the cost of those actually goes into like a tab more or less. And every state's different. I know Illinois actually is unique in that they allow you more money to do that. So that's why you see a lot more neon in Chicago than most other cities and stuff for that, because they give you a bigger budget for that. But if we put that into a bar or restaurant to like advertise Slightly Furry or something like that, we would actually have to keep track of how much that value is, because if we give something of value, that has to go against that amount. But if we give them like coasters or stickers or whatever, those are considered novelty items. Therefore don't really count towards that. But if they're really close to the register, then it looks like the establishment, that retailer, is giving favor in a way to a particular brand and all that, which again goes towards tied house. It's basically trying to level the playing field. So like the Anheuser-Busch's and all that stuff can't come in and just be like, everything is Budweiser now,
right?
Which that used to happen back in the day, which is part of why those rules went into effect.
The pre-prohibition, there were like literally the Budweiser bar.
Yeah, it was literally a bar that was nothing but, it's like, what beer would you like as long as it's Budweiser?
Right.
It'd be like if you look at coffee with Starbucks and Starbucks opening up next to the little guy, knowing like we could just take a profit loss until we kill them and take over this area. That's what it used to be pre-prohibition. And now it would be like, hey, you could sell coffee or roast the beans or grow the beans. You can't do all three.
It can't do all three.
That would be like kind of an analogy for that.
So is this all stuff that you guys have learned by trial and error, or are you guys like come from business backgrounds and have in a deepest pockets in the world where you have this endless supply of funding, or how did this all come about?
I come from a bar and restaurant background. My family's been running bars and restaurants since 1966 in Chicago. Chicago and Florida too, because some of my family tried to retire, got bored, built another bar. So I grew up in the bar and restaurant trade and knew quite a bit of it from, I guess, the retail side, but I didn't know all the details about what governed that. I just knew that there were distributors and they brought you alcohol. And every now and then they would come in with samples or like placements and stuff like that. So I didn't really know the details about how that all worked until I got into the production side. And then I started digging into all of the stuff that governs us, which is called the FAA, or Federal Alcohol Act. Which is the big one that governs us. There's technically 3 laws, but that's the big one that sets all the rules, or at least the bigger like swath of rules. And after reading through a lot of the details in there, that's where we learned of all the crazy stuff that goes on with it.
All right, cool. So what's are your brews available commercially, or is it just at the brewery or the tap room, or where can folks find your stuff?
So the ciders, we'll say that, because like they'll be a stickler about terminology, because like when you say brewery, that means beer.
Okay.
But for the cider makers, they'll always correct you to say like you're making cider. If you go with a legal definition,
Cidery.
it's technically wine, depending on what you do.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So for the cidery, we sell to a little over 30 accounts now, as we call them. So that's where we distribute to. We do have one that's permanent in Seattle. They always have us on tap. That's hard to do, like get onto someone's taps basically in a bar, because a lot of the times when you go into a bar, you're going to see mostly, if not all, beer taps. Like if you see anything that's on tap, that's usually what you'll find. It's kind of rare to find cider, even out here.
Oh yeah. I'm a cider drinker. I don't drink beer, and for me, when I go into a place, finding cider on tap, I'm like, oh, thank goodness. It's so hard to find a place that has cider on tap, and it's usually only 1 or 2 if they even have them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of our general experience as cider, and then even for mead, good luck even finding one at most bars. It's going to be a specialty product. They'll treat it like wine, so it'll usually be more expensive and stuff. So for us to like fight to get in the door with some of these places, it's a somewhat uphill battle. But when you can get in the door like we did with this one bar, actually, their biggest account right now, they had only one on tap, and it was Angry Orchard. And we knocked 2 beers off tap at this point to put our ciders up. And even when we get the next 2 flavors in, they're going to knock 2 more beers off the taps to put our ciders up, because they outsell most of their other beers.
Wow.
So
very cool.
It's been pretty impressive to watch that happen. But yeah, so we're in a lot of places. We're also in the first ever furry tap room that's out here, called Vulpine Tap Room. So it's very fox themed. They're not overtly furry, but it's very like you walk in and there's a giant fox mural. Like you can't miss it.
Can't miss it.
Okay. And you look around and it's like everything is very fox themed in general. All of it looks like a fox in some ways. So for me, it's awesome to see that.
That's where we did our first tapping party too, November, for first release and everything. Cool. They hosted us, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, we did sales records there. We were still the only half barrel keg to go on and off tap the same day.
Wow.
They've never killed a keg like that before.
It was incredibly loud, as we're all the related employees and friends that were in. I don't want to say in on it, but we're paying attention to the conversation as we're waiting for it. Is the next one? Is the next one? No, it's not that. It's the next one. And we're all screaming, and like the partners like, what is going on, guys? Calm down.
The owner got like a slow-mo video that he posted of the tap going. So you see it just starts sputtering halfway through the pour, because he kept going to the back to check, like, oh yeah, it's got to be this pour. It's got to be this pour. And there's enough left in the lines where it's just like just over a pint left or something.
Wow.
And then, so the other account that I was talking about before is CC's, which is sort of, I want to say newer-ish gay bar, but not really. But they're one of the other more modern gay bars that has now catered heavily, more towards furries. And they've been huge supporters of us down there too. So we kind of have 2 sides of Lake Washington covered now with lots of our cider.
They also do the fetch events and stuff too, and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's
nice. Yeah, I need to get up there to the rooms and stuff, because I only live down here in Oregon, so we should make a trip up there and and it's everything. So how big is your staff now? So you started out as you brewing in your garage, and now you've got a staff of how many?
It's basically just the ownership. It's just myself, Spork, and then the one who's not on this call that was working with you is Compy. He's our product designer basically. So he's responsible for all the labels you saw in the cans. The actual specific art is different artists, but the can label itself, he designed all that. Any of the other sort of stuff you've seen on the shelves, or when we're at tapping and tasting events, we got these nice little signs. He helped us design signs, the banners, all that stuff. Even ironically, with the banner that we have now is from some old stock art that we had originally set up that has a glass of beer in it instead of cider. We haven't updated it yet to have our glass of cider there.
Cider red. Enough.
It was a nice Irish red, so it looked like a cider. Yeah. You're good to go, right?
Yeah. It looks like Winchester, but a little more foamy.
So it's just three of you that do all of this. So you guys are deep into this.
Oh, I mean,
so And then, how many hours a day?
Oh, geez.
Like, what is sleep?
Yeah. Ownership life, and when you don't have like lots of hour tracking. Like at this point now, I've worked almost 7 days in a row this week in various capacities. They're just, because at this point now when I go out to bars, half the time it's going to be places that we do have our stuff on tap. So I'll be checking, like, is there an empty keg back there? Cool, I'll grab it and throw it in my car. And I would love to come back up here later and get it. So in a way, I'm kind of working at most of the places that I stop at. So I like it really turns off. And then as far as labor goes too, it's also, we have paid a couple of local furs to come help us on some of the production days, because now that we're scaling up the production, it gets a lot more unwieldy to manage. I think the initial batch we did was a little over 4,000 cans, and so we had to produce all those, and then we had to dip them in basically hot water to preserve them, and basically do heat pasteurization. So that requires lots of labor. You can't skip arm day when you do that one,
right?
Because you're lifting these 20-pound packs of cans and out of a giant hot water bath, several hundred at a time to get those done. And then you have to like restack them onto a pallet and then eventually get them in that. Like we were basically going from, we're going to have this little bucket and that's going to go into a little tank. And now we're like, I need a pallet with giant steel drums that are 400 pounds a piece.
We pretty much got it down now with how we do the whole process, take care of it. It gets better every time.
Yeah,
we gotten better and better at it. We're dialing it in more. It's just working out of a shared facility has made it difficult to pull off, because we have to coordinate so many schedules at once and kind of change things on the fly. That's probably where a lot of our stress comes from right now.
Oh yeah, we're co-packing, and what that just basically means is that someone has their own setup, whether it's brewery or cidery or whatever, as long as they have the winery license that we can get in there and craft. And when their tanks aren't being used, which they're not being used 100% of the time, you make your stuff, you fill it in cans and kegs. And then if you don't have any more kegs or cans to fill, it's empty tanks.
Right.
And that's tanks that you could rent out to someone else, essentially. So it's like, well, I'm not using them this week or that week. So we could get juice in for you to ferment and then mix with other stuff, filter, do what you got to do, put it in cans and kegs. And then, hey, now it's my turn again, or possibly someone else's. There are some people who do literally just that. They just have those and they barely make their own or don't make their own, and they just have people come in. But the guy we're working with, it's an alternating proprietorship. So he's already got 3 to 4 other people at a time. And being the co-packers that we didn't sign a lease with them, we're the lowest in the totem pole. So we have to kind of be like, may I have a day, sir? Where can I get in?
Even though we're coming in with money, but like, we'll pay to be here and all that stuff. Right. So that's kind of where our overhead comes from right now. So we started off, I think the first batch we did, we were taking in these giant, steel caged totes that were 275 gallons a piece. And so we did 3 of those, I think, to start. Now we're up to full tanker trucks that take up to 5,500 gallons of fresh apple juice.
Wow.
And we'll pull half of that into, like, we'll split tanker trucks with other cideries because it's cheaper, because the shipping fee is like $2,400 just to get it trucked across from the other side of the mountains. So if you can split that fee with another cidery, you can be like, all right, let's both go in on a giant tanker truck. of apple juice, and then we'll take like this much, and then you take the rest.
Another cool thing to do here, tons of cideries to split that with. If we were still in Illinois, I'd be like, there's the 5.
There's the 5, yeah, right, yeah. So how long does it take?
We don't even do half tankers out that way too. Like you're pretty much going to start with totes, which are going to be very expensive, and then you pretty much have to do a full tanker and split it with someone because the cost is so high. But out here, we can order half tankers, which are I think the minimum was like 2,500-ish, give or take. And then you can even order the super tankers, which are like 8,000 gallons. That's what some of the ciders out here go through at a time.
Yeah. Wow.
The really big scale ones, because we have like top 10 in the nation here. I think a third of that is all cideries that are out here as far as the major producers in the country. So.
Right. So how long does it take from the time you get the juice to the time you can a can of cider?
Let's see. Turbo button's about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is kind of what we're doing now, and that's a lot because we're on borrowed time. I think ideally, when we get our own space, then that's about a 4 to maybe 6 week most turnaround time, because the longer you let it kind of do its thing, the better. But the faster production facilities are usually about 3 week turnaround.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fine because we've seen 2, but we've also seen 4. So 3 weeks is kind of like that middle ground.
That's kind of the sweet
spot. It depends on like what kind of product you're making, and then if you want to clarify it, then you need to do some advanced filtration to it to make sure you can kind of get all the cloudiness out and stuff. Because if you have time, you can let it settle and kind of do things naturally. But a lot of times you have to constantly be filling and emptying those tanks in order to make money. So without those tanks being turned around.
Right. So are you guys on track to have your own space to do this without having to lease space or say, please, sir, may I have a day?
We're working on that. That's why we're now about to go through a big fundraising round again, because I put most of my life savings into this company now. But given how long it's taken and the move and everything over here and all that stuff too, that kind of really took a huge hit to our initial funds. So now we're at this point now looking to raise a lot more money, both through a combination of a Kickstarter or other angel investors and stuff. So I'm on the hunt now to find people with some fairly deep pockets to throw money at us, so we can have our own facility and also a space that we can host people at. Because we know that having the taproom model is the more sustainable way to do this, because again, that distribution part, like even if we do wholesale distribution, which is what we're doing now, we still aren't making as much as we could if we were the ones pulling the taps. If we were pulling the taps, we're making that full retail margin. So, because we still sell our stuff at a discount to all these retailers, and we know that we could be making more if we were doing it ourselves.
Very cool. Very cool.
So yeah, we're on track to build out at least. We have a lease space in downtown Tacoma. We're on track to build out at least a small taproom section first, and then do it in phases. It's pretty big. We can't throw all the money at it right away to build it out, but we're going to at least get the taproom set up. Like basic bathrooms and some little ovens to have snacks and small food and whatnot. And then grow from there, which will probably be production right after that, which is where one of the significant investments goes, plumbing and electrical and everything that you got to do. And for like the glycol system, the chilling for the tanks themselves, giant steel tanks that are very, very expensive, getting a giant fridge installed. That'll be the next spot. And then going back to like making the tap room do the full final build with the kitchen and a mezzanine and all this stuff and arcade cabinets and whatever you can think of.
All that stuff. That stuff. So none of your stuff is available in Oregon then, is what I'm hearing. Or do you have anybody down here in Oregon?
No. That gets complicated when it comes to state licensing. So when we switch everything over, we can apply to Oregon State in order to distribute down there. But then it's a matter of getting it distributed down there or signing with the distributor who goes down there in order to get across the state lines. The other thing we're looking at too, since we're switching our since we're switching our licenses over from distribution to production, that opens the door for us to start from the federal side of what we call direct to consumer sales. That was something that kind of got way bigger over the pandemic. It was already doing pretty well because wine is actually better set up than beer was for doing, like I go online, I click a button.
They've been doing it forever.
They've been doing it for a long time. So the laws were like advantageous, and we can actually use those laws for the most part, even as cider makers. So we can apply to various states. I think Oregon, we still need to wait until we get our Washington license to apply to them, because they need to see that we have a statewide production license. But I know within Washington state, we can almost immediately direct to consumer. So someone over in Spokane who would never drive stuff over, not never, but we wouldn't drive over all the way over there to distribute to like 1 or 2 stores. That's pretty expensive for us to distribute out there that way without going through a distributor. But they can go online, click a button, and then UPS will take care of it for us. So that way, that's where the shipping cost would be, is like you as the consumer would pay that. But then we can send it directly to your door.
And the cool thing about those D2C distributors are they take a much lower cut than the big boy distributors that'll come in with the truck.
Oh, sure.
They want to almost cut you in half. These ones will take a little bit off the top, which makes it negligible and also really good to go into. And I mean, that's the thing that we're also looking at. We're wondering how awesome that's going to be, because furries are like everywhere.
Right.
So it's like, okay, so D2C online sales blew up over COVID, over lockdown. What is also going to happen to furries? Like, we have them, of course, in state and folk that'll travel, but like, we're wondering, I'm like, how big is that going to be when we start doing that online for people in Florida or New York or Texas or whatever, Illinois?
And to divine that better, it'll be cans or bottles specifically. We can't really do kegs. Doing anything of larger volume like that requires a distribution for most states. So it's a different story.
Cool. So are all your ciders then apple-based, or do you try other fruits from time to time?
They're all apple-based. That's not entirely by law. Basically, as long as it's a fruit-based thing, it would be considered a fruit wine. But if you're making it apple or pear-based, it could be considered hard cider, as long as that's the only ingredient in it, or there's a limited number of other ingredients you can put in for it to still be called hard cider as far as the tax class goes, because that's where it gets complicated for us, is how much taxes do we pay based on how that product is made. But generally speaking, they're all apple-based right now. Even the new one we have coming up is going to be apple-based.
Yeah, if you want to get overly technical with it, it's like pears are a perry, apple-based ones are cider. We're pretty much United States, probably, well, the whole North America, probably the only one who calls like cloudy apple juice you get at the grocery store that's not a booze cider. Where the rest of the world is either like filtered apple juice or unfiltered apple juice. And then when you turn it into booze, it is cider.
Right.
So all our ciders, because we're calling them cider, have to be apple-based, or also be some sort of other wine thing. But they all start with like apples we ferment that go really dry, and we get all the alcohol out of, and then we add an adjunct, which would be another juice. So pineapple, cherries are a bunch of cherries, ginger is ginger, and then if it needs more sweetness, we put more unalcoholized, unfermented cider in there to bring sweet back up. And that's a very basic overview of how we do our recipes, but that's also one of the key things we love, is we keep it simple so that we can say to the can, I'm like, I see 2 or 3 ingredients in here and it's not a giant scientific name. And I'm like, that's the point.
That's point. Right. It's all.
Yeah. That's part of our regulation too. That's like the thing you'll see with ciders is we're actually partly regulated through the FDA, which breweries and distilleries don't have right now. So as a cider maker, it's actually a little bit harder because you actually have to list all of your ingredients on your can. Even unless it's just straight apple cider, like where it's only apples in that can, you don't have to list that. But since we are apples with other stuff, we have to list all those ingredients out. And especially if there's allergens too, you have to list those. At some point when we cross a certain threshold, we have to also do like the whole nutrition facts thing.
Oh God, jeez.
We're not there yet, thank goodness, but we will eventually have to be in order to stay compliant.
The cool thing about that is that they're revamping all the laws. So like right now, for the longest time, breweries, because craft brewing started up, to like kind of take a step back, cideries were more popular before Prohibition, but then after Prohibition, breweries became more popular when they came back, and like beer became more popular than cider. And so craft brewing has been a thing for forever. So the laws have always made it simpler and easier. So when you look at the website of what craft brewing has to do with like their taxes and stuff, it's like a little tiny box. And when we see it, it's like this giant box.
Oh, geez.
Spreadsheet basically of like, what size scale are you? Because then you get like a farm credit thing, more or less, based on how big you are. So we actually get a huge tax advantage right now because of how small we are. The bigger we get, the more that advantage goes away.
Well, the cool part, though, is they're looking to make all the laws less convoluted.
Yeah.
But beer is a little scared because they're like, the government's kind of going, you're getting away with almost murder here, especially with your seltzers. Thank you.
Yeah.
So like we're going to have to scrutinize this a little bit more, because seltzers, since the door was so wide open, people took that, and now people have been like, what's this thing in my seltzer that literally makes me sick?
Right.
From big boys, right? So now the government's like, we have to look at this. And then in looking at that, they looked at beer and I'm like, why is your door so open? So Cider's like, can you open ours more? And I'm like, yeah, this is unfair. We need to open yours more and close yours more. So we actually have nothing but easy to look forward to, because it's like, oh, wait, you're just going to strip away laws and make it easier and fix tax passes? We love it. And then all our brewing friends are like, everything's going to be horrible. And it's like,
welcome to our world. Yeah.
Favorite child for like 20 years, 40 years. I'm like, no sympathy.
No sympathy whatsoever. No sympathy whatsoever.
There's like certain things we can't put in our cider. Like we're not allowed to use any form of grain that includes rice. So not allowed to use that at all. We also can't use molasses. We have to basically follow a list called the GRAS list, or generally recognized as safe. It's an FDA official list. Like for example, one that came off that list was caffeine. Thanks, Four Loko. Yeah, so FDA actually pulled that one off because they were like, oh, people have basically gotten really seriously hurt off of this alcohol caffeine combo. So you won't really see that again.
Malt beverage.
Yeah, malt beverages and stuff.
Brewing, getting away with stuff. Because I digressed on that a little bit. Is brewing, the main point is you're making your wort, right? Your mash. You're like, it's all like all your grains in there that you boil and liquefy and get the sugars out of. That's kind of malt beverage. Is similar to that. So that's why they would fall under that. And that's why they kind of have the get away with murder thing.
Right.
And then they go with the rice thing. That's where it gets super convoluted, because we could make sake, but we can't, because this one government says it's a wine and this one says it's a beer.
Yeah.
But then this also says
sake is
beer and a wine.
Right.
Yeah, sake is the loophole, because sake requires a beer license to produce it, but in order to package it for sale, you need a wine license. So
wow,
we can eventually partner with a brewery, and we can do what we call a bond transfer. So basically, whenever you're producing inside of a facility, and this is how we work with the government on it, we actually have to draw out a map for them of like, where are we making this stuff, and then where are we technically selling it, or where are we storing it after it's been packaged up into like cans, kegs, bottles, whichever. So basically when it's ready for sale. And that's what the government calls tax paid, or that's where the term bonding comes from. So where we produce, basically nothing in there is sellable, so therefore it's not taxable. But once it goes into some kind of packaging, at that point the government's like, all right, where's my cut?
Right.
And that's where you have to like actually physically market too. So if we ever get audited or visited by any one of the liquor authority people, they need to see like a giant, like it could even just be like a Post-it that says this is tax paid.
Literally right out of the market.
Yeah.
Yeah, gonna write it on Sharpie. Be like, I paid for this. Don't
Wow.
worry. It's all good.
They don't care.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
Cool.
they just want their cut.
They just want their
of course.
cut.
They just want their money. They just want their money.
Yep.
So one of the things we like to do with our guests is play a game. So I actually created a Jeopardy game for you guys to play. So I'm not going to give Rayne an opportunity to make the first pick because he's on my staff. So Martini, give me a number between 1 and 20.
1 and 20. Let's do 14.
14. Okay. And Spork?
7.
7. Okay. Spork, you were closest. I had number 5 written down. So you'll be able to choose the first thing. I'm going to share my screen. And the way you will choose or tell us to buzz in, because we don't have a buzzer like on Jeopardy, you'll just say your name, and whichever one I hear first, that's what you're going to do. So you can see my screen, right?
Yep.
All right.
Okay. So this is BFFT Jeopardy! Let's meet our contestants. From Tacoma, Washington, he's a brewer of cider and a furry. Meet Martini. Also from Tacoma, Washington, a cider brewer and furry. Meet Spork. From Salem, Oregon, a co-producer and writer and editor for the BFFT podcast. Meet Rayne Raccoon. Spork. Our categories are famous furries, beer and cider, furry conventions, beer history, and I apologize, I know you probably don't know a lot about beer, but you might, and miscellaneous. So, Spork, what's your pick?
Let's start with furry conventions for 100, Trebek.
Furry conventions for 100. This convention is held in Reno, Nevada.
Rayne.
Rayne.
That would be BLFC.
Or the way to pronounce
Biggest Little
it.
Furcon.
Or What is
BLFC?
SFC? Correct.
Yes. I keep forgetting
Okay.
it's Jeopardy.
Okay, Rayne, you now get the next choice.
Let's see. I'm going to go with Famous Furries for 100.
Famous Furries for 100. This furry musical artist has recorded scores for major motion pictures at Abbey Road Studios.
Oh.
Time's up. The answer was Fox Amore. Rayne, you still have the choice.
Let's go miscellaneous for 200.
This fursuiter gives the Good Furry Award every year.
Rayne.
Rayne?
Who is Papa Bear?
Grubs Grizzly was what the answer we were looking for.
Yeah, but he's Papa Bear.
No, Grubs Grizzly was the answer. Yes, so you are down. All right. So it goes back to Spork.
All right. Let's go with beer history for 200.
This revolutionary brewer included a recipe in his notebook for small beer.
Small beer.
Rayne.
Rayne, go ahead.
Who is Benjamin Franklin?
No, we were looking for who is George Washington.
That was a good guess.
Okay. Let's go to Martini for a choice.
Okay, I'll do beer/cider for 100.
This style of beer is usually pale and seasonal.
Oh, Martini.
Martini.
That would be what is known as a pale ale. Oh, Saison.
We were actually looking for Saison because it's seasonal. Yes.
Yep.
Spork, choose a category.
All right, let's do
I went too obvious on that one.
Furry conventions 200.
This convention chair is famous for wearing a lab coat.
Spork.
Spork.
Who is Uncle Kage?
Correct. Okay, make your choice.
Let's keep going down. Furry conventions 300.
This convention is a mile high.
Martini.
Spork.
Martini.
See, it'd be Denver.
What is Denver? Correct.
What is Denver? I'm sorry.
Yes. Well, you just say, okay. All right, choose a category.
Let's see. Let's do beer/cider for 200.
This beer style is brewed at colder temperatures with bottom fermenting yeast.
Martini.
Martini, go ahead.
What is known as a lager.
What is a lager? Correct. All right, Martini, you're in lead with 400. Take your next chat category.
Let's do miscellaneous for 100.
This insoluble gas imparts a smoother texture into the brew.
Spork.
Spork.
What is nitrogen?
What is nitrogen is correct. All right, that takes you up to 300. Choose your next category.
Let's do famous furries 300.
This furry dancer wears a gold crown on his right
Rayne.
ear. Rayne.
Who is Fluke Husky?
Who is Fluke Husky is correct. That takes you to 0, and you get
At least
control
I
of
don't
the
know
board.
anything now.
Yeah.
Let's go. Famous furries for 400.
This furry is best known for gaming in Fursuit Head.
Martini.
Spork.
Who is I know his name. Yep.
Martini.
Who is Sonic Fox?
There you go.
Who is Sonifox? Correct. All right, you have control of the board.
All right, let's go. Let's do famous furries for 200.
This furry author wrote the Kindred series. We were looking for Ruckus. Who is Ruckus?
It was right on the tip of my tongue. I just could not remember.
Okay, Martini, go ahead.
Let's just finish it out. Do famous furries for 500.
This furry author holds regular writing weekend seminars.
Rayne.
Rayne?
Who is Kyle Gold?
Who is Kyle Gold?
Ooh.
Correct.
Well done.
All right, Rayne, you get the control of the board.
Let's go beer history for 400.
This 1920s law helped usher in the rise of root beer and other near beer substitutes.
Rayne.
Rayne?
What is prohibition?
Correct. It's the Volstead Act, but yes,
Volstead
we'll
Act,
give you that. Okay, you have control of the board.
Let's go for miscellaneous for 300.
This country is famous for its oyster stout.
Spork.
Spork.
What is the UK?
What is New Zealand?
Different island.
Oyster stout. I don't. Oh, that just doesn't sound
That doesn't
appealing.
sound good at all. No, I say, okay, Rayne, you still have control of the board.
Let's go beer cider for 300.
This beer name translates to yeast wheat in English.
Spork.
Spork, go ahead.
What is a Weiss or Hefeweiss?
What is a Hefeweizen? Correct.
Nice.
All right, that takes you to 600 and control of the board.
Let's do Furry Conventions 500.
This is the largest Asian furry convention and is held in Manila.
Oh.
Mm.
The answer was, what is furry penas? Okay, Spork, you still have control of the board.
Let's finish it out. Furry Conventions 400.
This convention usually takes up to 5 to 10 city blocks.
Spork.
Spork, go ahead.
What is Anthrocon?
What is Anthrocon is correct. That takes you up to 1,000 and controlling the board.
Let's do miscellaneous 400.
While not the largest volume brewer in America, this company has the largest single-site brewery in the world.
Martini.
Martini, go ahead.
What is Boston Beer Company or Samuel Adams?
That's what I was thinking. No.
Oh, Molson.
Molson Coors. All right, Spork, you still have control of the board.
Beer history 300.
This Sumerian beer god is also a brand name in America. We were looking for, what is Ninkasi?
Oh, I wouldn't have known
Ninkasi. All right.
Yeah, did not know that one.
Okay, Spork, you're still got control.
Well, let's get rid of Misk. Let's do Misk 500.
The German Stein makers added a lid to their steins in order to prevent the spread of what disease?
Spork?
Spork, go ahead.
What is the Black Plague? Probably not that at all.
That is correct. What is the bubonic plague?
Total shot in the dark.
Solid guess.
All right, Spork.
Like, is it old enough? Let's do beer and cider 400.
This cider is sometimes called cider IPA.
Cider IPA.
Yeah, the time is, what is dry hopped cider?
Mm.
Okay, I mean, that would be.
I was going to say hopped, but not dry hopped.
Yeah.
All right, Spork, 3 choices.
Beer and cider 500.
This country drinks more beer and cider than any other country in the world.
Spork.
Spork, go ahead.
What is Spain?
What is the Czech Republic? All right. That takes you back. You still have control of the board. Choose one.
Beer and cider 100.
This brewer founded Budweiser.
Rayne.
Rayne, go ahead.
Who is Anheuser-Busch?
Adolphus Busch. Sorry.
At least it was only 100.
Yeah. All right. Well, that leaves the final category. Hops were first used to make beer by which religious order?
Martini.
Martini, go ahead.
Was it Trappist monks? What is Trappist monks?
There you go.
It's
Oh,
the
Benedictines.
Benedictines.
Oh,
The Benedictines.
Not had that one right. Yeah.
Okay. So that gives us a score of Martini with 300, Spork with 1,000, and Rayne with 800, which takes us into Final Jeopardy. Okay, so make your wagers. So everybody got their wagers locked in. Wages are locked in. And here comes the answer to Final Jeopardy. The infamous CSI episode called Fur and Loathing saw the 2 main investigators attending this FurCon. Martini, what was your wager?
Mine was 300.
300.
I bet it all.
And what was your answer?
What is PAFCON? Plushies and Furries Convention.
That is correct. All right, so you get 300.
Sad that I kind of.
Oh, I remember it was something like that.
Okay,
I
Spork.
right away.
What was your answer? Or what, Spork? How much did you wager?
I just go big or go home. I bet it all.
Bet it all. And what was your answer?
I remembered it started with P, so I said, "What is PawCon, not PAFCon?"
No, so that takes you down to 0. And Rayne, what was your answer, and how much did you wager?
I wagered 400.
Mm-hmm.
And my answer is I didn't know.
Well, that means Martini Soft is our champion for Jeopardy on BFFT today. Congratulations, Martini.
Nice. Congrats.
All right, guys. I told you I wouldn't take up more than an hour of your time, and I'm over that by 2 minutes. That's it for this episode. Thanks to Martini and Spork for joining us this week. Be sure to check out their website, which I'll include in the show notes, which I checked it yesterday, and it says under construction. So hopefully you guys are going to get that up and running pretty soon. And if you're in the Seattle area, which town are you in actually? Not in Seattle proper, I don't think, are you?
Yeah, we're currently in Seattle proper. That's where our warehouse is at. But the company is located in Tacoma now. So.
Tacoma, okay. And the Vulpine Tap Room?
We have space out there.
Downtown Tacoma on Pacific Avenue.
Downtown Tacoma on Pacific Avenue. Okay, and remember, folks, you can get BFFT merch at Fourth Wall Bonfire or Redbubble, and you can help support the show through donations at Patreon or Ko-Fi, or by subscribing to the show on Buzzsprout. You don't have to subscribe to listen, but the donations help keep the lights on here at Injured Nerve Studios. Any final thoughts from either of you gentlemen? Any words of wisdom to the furry fandom, perhaps?
Cider making is fun and easy to do, honestly. Same goes for beer making and all that too. It's worth giving a shot or trying, and even like going to your local. You probably have a local brew shop nearby, but there's also lots of online resources too. So getting into it wasn't as hard or scary as I initially thought. Over 10 years ago.
You can make good stuff easier than you think. Lots of stuff out there, lots of YouTubers, and we're going to help into that eventually. Once we get our home base up and running, we're going to be wanting to do YouTubes and Twitches and basically putting our recipes, and here's how you do it.
Nice. Very nice.
Well, I should be teaching a class locally here soon enough. So.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, maybe I'll venture up there. It's only a 4-hour drive. It's not that bad.
Yeah. We were just down near neck of the woods, so why not?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe you'll make a special cider for the podcast and just we can sell it at Anthrocon or something. Who knows? Not Anthrocon, A&W up there. So, anyway, folks, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, Moobarkfluff and stay furry.
Barely Furcasting is an Injured Nerve studio production and is found on all major podcast platforms or can be heard directly at barelyfurcasting.com. The opinions expressed here are those of the hosts and their guests, and no commercial compensation was granted. The Furcast is produced, recorded and directed by Barely Normal, aka Mike Began, and is edited by Barely and our associate editor Rayne Raccoon. Opening and closing theme music, as well as some interstitial music, was created for Injured Nerves Productions for the use on the podcast by Reg Day with Damian Tanuki. If you would like to hear more music by Reg Day, you can search for Tweezerbeak on Bandcamp or Hoop Loop Tunes on SoundCloud. Other interstitial and background music by Shane Ivers through silvermansound.com, Gator Tots on soundcloud.com, and the YouTube Free is Library. If you would like to send us a message, you can do so via email at barelyfurcasting@gmail.com or on our Telegram chat at BFFTchat, on Twitter, on our Facebook page, or on the barelyfurcasting.com webpage. You can help support the show through donations at kofi.com/barelyfurcasting or through Patreon at patreon.com/barelyfurcasting. Thanks for listening. We hope you come back and listen next week.